Good morning.
Good morning.
How was your weekend?
Oh, my weekend was okay. It was a little windy on Sunday, though, right?
Yeah, I think it was a little cold over the weekend.
Yeah, and it's super cold today, which is Monday.
Hmm.
But yeah, hopefully it doesn't snow this Wednesday.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So we're already in March. Well, it's
Yeah,
the beginning of the week. We got to think positive.
that's true. Always be positive.
Well, talking about positive, there's a lot of talk. We in a lot of the stuff that we put out there, and all of the emails I put out, and as I'm meeting new supers out there, resident managers. We're always talking about co-ops and condos and rental buildings and brownstones, single-family brownstones, and um, I took a step back because some of our some of the people who are newest to our team have asked me about co-ops and condos. So I thought, just in case, maybe we should talk about what co-ops and condos are, as well as rental buildings. And in New York City, you have all of the buildings that you see around you. They're going to be one of just a handful of where the buildings where people live in. I mean, there are only going to be a handful of different types of apartments. So it would either be a rental, it would either be a co-op or a condo, or single family or two family apartments. So and in other boroughs, you may have more of one type of building than the other, and so forth in Manhattan. So I thought maybe it would be great to kind of go over these different types of buildings. But I also think that there's a couple of reasons why you should know if you're coming into this industry, or if you're part of this industry, is that when you interview with a building, and you're whether it's a co-op, condo, or rental building, there's different terminologies for each building, and nothing makes you look more can make you more professional, look like you're more experienced and professional, than to be able to use the same terminology as they do, and also understand how it works, because in each of these buildings, as you know, they operate differently in each of these buildings, or how these buildings operate, what their goals are different. They can vary from building to building, or from one type to another type.
Right. So, like, for example, I go to an interview, and they're interviewing for a super in a co-op building. So, and the interviewer asks, why did you sign up for a co-op super? I just saw the posting. Do you know what a co-op is? Do you know what the difference is between co-op and condo? And say if I can't really answer that, it's pretty embarrassing. And if you know how to answer that, that you're gonna look really, really good compared to other competitors, and they're gonna say oh, this guy knows what he's doing or she's doing. So I think it's crucial to know, just even if you don't know all the specific things that differentiates all these buildings, but you should know the basics, I feel like.
Yeah, you should know the basics. And because you're right, when you go into a meeting, if you don't know how to use a terminology about that building, it could make you seem like a newbie.
Yeah, even if you are experienced,
Right.
These are really basic, fundamental things that you should know if you're in a building industry, maintenance industry, like this is like ABCs of the field.
Right.
And also there were some words that I personally am confused sometimes, like owners, landlords, shareholders, like resident,
Oh.
tenant, subtenant,
Right.
like sublet. I think if we can kind of dabble on those as well, just in case if someone asks, like I feel like I should be able to answer these pretty clearly, and I
Right.
feel like I should know how they're different. Like what's the difference between resident and tenant?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think, I think it'll be a good time to go over some of the basic terminologies in this episode.
And it's also great because it's easy to learn. There's not much out. There's not many words here. There's not many terminologies. There's just a handful, and it applies once you figured out whether a building is a co-op, condo, or rental. It applies to all of those buildings in the same categories.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're learning a huge dictionary of words. You're just learning a few important stuff. And this is the other cool thing that you can, and I don't know if we're going to have time to talk about here, but you can map your financial future or your professional path by knowing which type of building is going to serve you better. Because these buildings are not equal in how it can help you on your path to where you want to get to, either financially, professionally, or both. So knowing these, and I think some of the more seasoned RMs out there and supers out there do know the difference between these, and they know how each type will give them. One type will give them more opportunities, financial opportunities, than the other, or maybe more job security than the others. But it's good that we go over them here, and we'll start with the basics.
Yes, and I try to Google these words, and I just have no idea what they're talking about. Like, it's really difficult. So,
Right.
if you can make it as simple as possible, it'll be great, as easy
I'll
as
try.
possible.
I'm not the best person at simplifying things. I
Yeah.
can make things more difficult unnecessarily. So if you can just keep me grounded in what I'm saying, that'd be great.
Okay, I might be asking a lot of questions, so.
Okay.
All right. Hopefully there won't be much, but too many. But okay, let's start.
Okay, let's start. So let's talk. What do you want to talk about first? Which building?
Like buildings. So it seems like there are like 5 different types of buildings.
5 main types, I would say.
Main types,
Yeah, main types.
yeah.
There could be others that we're forgetting here, but the ones that we deal with a lot, especially if you're going to be working in Manhattan, it's going to be those types.
Yes.
So, for instance, that type is, so we have rental buildings, co-ops, cooperatives, there's condominiums, and there are brownstones, and multifamily. I guess multifamily housing kind of falls along rental buildings, but there's 2-family housings in Queens or the other boroughs that need similar servicing that we're called to do. So I don't want to leave them out, but in Manhattan you're basically going to see those types of buildings.
So co-ops, condos, brownstones, rentals, single landlord, and what about multifamily?
Multifamily single landlords.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, multifamily rental buildings. They kind of fall under rental buildings.
Okay, so single landlord and multifamily is rental?
Just rental, I would say. Yeah.
What if the owner lives there?
Yeah, it's still a rental.
Still
Because
rental
he's
building?
renting, the owner lives there, but he's renting it out to other people, so other families. So,
No, like if the owner lives there and that's the only family that
well,
lives in
that
the.
would be like a single family or brownstone. In Manhattan, there's no, usually those are brownstones. Those are single buildings that have, that the one person takes over.
Okay, so I'm getting confused here. Like,
All right.
I know we haven't really started, but
And I take things for granted because if you're doing this, over and over again, what was once complicated to me, becomes simple.
okay,
So,
then let's start with the easy ones. Not easy ones, the most famous ones, which is co-ops and condos.
okay. So actually, I think that those are the harder ones. I think rentals are probably what people are most familiar with. Rentals are building, apartments that you have tenants that live inside. So the people that live inside these buildings are called tenants, and they usually pay the landlord. They pay there's a lease, so he gets a lease, which is a permission to stay, an agreement to stay, in exchange for rent. So that rent goes to the landlord, and that landlord uses that for, various things like the upkeep of the building, the mortgage on the building, whatever. But that's the simplest structure, because in a multifamily single landlord situation, which is a rental building, you have one landlord. And just for the purposes, I'm not going to go into like, what type of landlord is it? Is it a person, or is it a corporation, or is it a partnership? I won't go into that. But all I'll say is that, in just to simplify things, usually in a rental building, there's one landlord. There's a single person or entity up there who owns that building, the entire building. So all of the apartments and all of the space is owned by a single entity or person. And whoever lives in that building and has a lease pays rent to the landlord.
Okay, so that's rental equals single landlord, right?
Rental equals single landlord. Yeah.
Okay. Then what about multifamily?
Well, maybe I'm confusing you, because multifamily just simply means it's a building with multiple units in it.
Okay, so it
Like,
can be a co-op condo, like brownstones. It just means you have a lot of units.
it means you have multiple units that people are living in.
Okay, so
Let me see if there's maybe a legal, like a official word for this. Um,
so any kind of apartment building you see is actually a multifamily then.
yeah. So multifamily, it's just that's a classification of a type of building. So it's how the city looks at a building. If it has multiple families in there living in separate apartments or separate areas of the building, it's called a multifamily
Okay, so it's a
residential
broader
building.
term.
Right,
Broader
right,
term.
right. And I guess what then, how we should break this down is to say that there's, co-ops, condos, rental buildings, brownstones,
Okay.
right?
Brownstones, what's a brownstone then?
So brownstones are basically, do you remember the show, The Cosby Show? And do you remember they lived in a really nice, like, building that was like sandwiched between similar buildings?
Like townhouse?
Like, for instance, we have a client on West 11th Street who owns that brownstone, that building. It's brownstone. And there's a single family that lives there. And she hires Spark Super to take care of the trash and the cleaning.
So brownstone is more like a type of building.
Brownstone is a type of building. I mean, I think the official, uh, th- when we say brownstone, it evokes a style of building. It evokes a style of building where, you have a densely populated area. There's a lot of people in New York City living together. So to have whole families with many family members living in the same building, you know, you're it's kind of like a house in the city.
Yeah, so then can you rent out the brownstone?
Yeah, you could rent out the brownstone. So then the owner, then it becomes a rental where you have a tenant living there, and then you have one person that owns that brownstone.
So brownstone just simply means one family house.
Yes.
Can it be two family?
It could be two family. I mentioned that there's two family housing in other boroughs. So, okay, just to make it easy, these are great questions, and I'm not the best person to explain this, but basically a brownstone is an owner-occupied building.
Okay, then, but you said you can rent it out.
They can rent it out. If they move to a different state and they don't want to leave it empty and they want to make rent, they can rent it out. So it then becomes a rental building.
Okay, I think what you're trying to say is brownstone can be, I mean, it could vary, but usually in general, when you say a brownstone, it's one family apartment, like house, building, one family building,
Yes. So,
typically.
yes.
And
So,
the owner usually lives there. There
right.
are cases when you could rent it out. In that case, if you want to, you say it's a rental building, but usually you say it's a brownstone because it's like one family building.
Right. I mean, the city may call it something different, right?
But usually in this industry, we say, oh, it's like a house. One family lives in there.
Right. It's like a single family brownstone. And we'll get to it, but there's a particular reason why a lot of, for instance, resident managers take on brownstones versus other types of buildings with more tenants or residents inside.
Okay, and when you say rental, usually it's multiple units.
Yeah, usually it's multiple units where there are people living there that are not related to the landlord.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that equals a single landlord building.
That equals a single landlord building.
Okay, I got it. Then, okay, co-ops and condos.
So do you think we should we should really call it co-ops, condos, single landlord buildings,
Yeah, that's
and
it.
brownstones.
Brownstones, I don't. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that
Okay.
would make sense.
I mean, just for the purpose of later on, it'll be important as to what the differences could mean.
Okay. So brownstones are like houses, separate houses like you see in Jersey or Queens.
Yeah, it's like a house in the city.
House, and other ones are like multiple apartments.
Right. So that's people actually living on top of each other and in this, and those are, I guess, in just going back to the meaning of multifamily, that's would be a multifamily where in a single building you have multiple families living in there. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So you have, we just talked about landlords, single landlord rental buildings. Let's talk about condos first. In a condo building, let's say there's a multifamily condo building, so you have multiple apartments with different people living inside. Each of those people may own that unit. So they actually own the inside of the apartment, the walls, the ceiling. They actually own that space. That space, that maybe if they're on the third floor, of that building, they actually own that space on the third floor. Um, so in that building, basically each of those apartments can be seen as a single house with its own, like when you buy an apartment or buy a house, you get the deed, right?
Right.
And so that deed says that you own that physical thing. So that's also what you get when you buy a condo. And a condo, you get the deed to that space.
Yeah, and you also have to pay property tax on that, right?
Yeah, so then that means that you pay actual property tax on just that thing, that unit, your apartment.
Right.
And which also means that so it's kind of seen as the apartment is seen as its own little house with its own property taxes, its own, utilities, its own, whatever comes with, it's kind of like owning your own house.
That's, I think that's easy.
Right.
Easy. Does a condo have boards?
Yeah. So a condo is run because you have multiple owners in there. They all own these apartments, and you may have different people that own different apartments. All the stuff that happens in a condo building, is run by a board of managers. So a board of managers is actually a group of owners that are elected by the rest of the owners of the building, and they come and they, meet up, and then they make decisions about the buildings. And
Yeah, like because, for example, elevators, everyone has to use elevators. So the board of managers, but they decide how much money, they're going to spend on elevators and common areas, right?
right. So they make those decisions. If they need to make an upgrade on the elevator, or if they need a new intercom system. So basically,
Like representatives, it's like Congress.
it's like representatives, yeah. So each of those owners, the owners are elected. Certain owners of the building are elected or they volunteer their services to the board, and the board makes these decisions. So the important thing here is that multiple people come together to make decisions.
I see. And here, board of managers, it doesn't mean it's the management company, right?
No. Now, management company would be different. So the board are a group of owners. So these owners may pay an outside manager, building manager, property manager, to come to help it manage the building stuff, all the business.
So they're separate, different people.
Yeah, so there are different people. They're usually outside person that the building pays. So everyone together shares the expense of paying for this building manager to help take care of all of the things that happen in the building.
Okay, I think condo is easier to understand.
Right.
But when it comes to co-op, there are a lot of similarities, right? But there are also differences.
So co-op is similar in the way that it has a board as well.
Yeah, and you have multiple people living in there.
Yes, because it's multiple owners, or co-owners, there's a board that makes that decision. So on behalf of all of the owners. But where it differs from the condo is that they're not really owners of their apartments. They're owners of the shares of the corporation that owns that building. So that's why they're called shareholders. They have these shares that show that they own parts of the whole building as a whole, and they don't live there, or they don't own that physical space. They don't own the walls or anything. They just own that piece of paper that says that they are co-owners of the entire building.
The entire building, okay.
Right.
So if you have, so how does that convert to physical space?
Okay, so basically the physical space.
So if you have, like, let's say, like, do they sell 1-bedroom apartment for like 3 shares, and 2-bedroom apartments you need to buy 6 shares? Is that like that?
Yeah, so basically the shares are divided according to, let's say, the size of the apartment. So someone with a larger apartment has more shares, right? Most likely.
I see.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I think it's co-ops. You really have kind of like, I think I have to really look into it, because it's so hard to imagine that you don't own that space, right?
Yes.
But I think maybe I can come up with a familiar analogy. So let's think of pizza. We all love pizza, right?
That's perfect.
Yeah, so in a condo, you own your own small personal pizzas. But in co-ops, the owners, quote, shareholders, there are no shareholders in condo, right?
Right.
So shareholders only co-ops, and there's this huge, large pizza pie, and you own a piece of that. And if you, one piece is for like $1, if you pay $2, you get 2 pieces or larger piece.
Yeah, I guess that could be it. But
it's
I
just
think
like the whole big pizza that you're sharing with multiple people.
Yeah, the only place where I'm losing you is that maybe we can say that pizza owns that building. So you may own a larger slice. You may, like on a pizza pie, you may be entitled, you may have bought 3 slices. But that just means that you bought 3 slices of a company that owns the building. You don't really buy 3 slices, because I'm getting mixed up, because
I'm just referring pizza as building.
As a building?
Yeah.
But I mean, I can see that working too. I'm just trying to think of, because in a building, in a co-op building, you don't really own that space. You don't own anything physical. In a co-op, you only own paper that says that you own parts of the entire building.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like,
it's really hard concept.
It is, but I think it's important to learn still. I know it's difficult, but it's important to learn, because if you're a part-time super and you're, let's say, asked to go into an apartment to take care of something, you really have to know. One of the things we talked about in prior episodes is make sure you know who's going to pay for what. And in the case of a co-op, you would have to know exactly where the responsibilities lie, so that you know who's going to pay you for a job that you do at the end of the day. Is it going to be the shareholder or the building, the co-op itself, or something? So even though it's difficult, if it's a difficult concept, it's something that I think it's, especially if you're going to be going into co-ops and if you want to be a part-time super in a co-op, it's so critical that you understand the difference, because if you don't, you're not going to succeed in that area.
Okay, then is there any easier explanation, or at least I know the structure?
Maybe we should think of it this way. Imagine there's like a nice Ferrari, right? So let's say you share that Ferrari, and it's in the title that you get to the car, you pay together with a whole bunch of people to buy that Ferrari. So when you get that title, you're not going to get a title that says you own the dashboard and you own the driving wheel or the gas pedal. Everyone's name is on a single title that says that they own the car as a whole. You can't take the door off and say, this is my door, I paid part of it, and so I'm gonna walk away with this door or the engine. No, everyone owns a piece of everything. So that's the concept here, is that if you and 10 friends buy a Ferrari, and the benefit of that is the whole car. And it may be an agreement that you guys make, who gets to drive it on the weekend, who gets to take it to the club. But you can't split the car into 10 parts and walk away with it, right? You may have an agreement between you and says, okay, I'm going to take it on the first Tuesday of first Friday of every month, and that's how you do it. So if you think of the building as a Ferrari, none of the people own that apartment, but how they get to live there is that they have a lease that they sign with the co-op that allows them to live inside their apartment and to be the primary controller of what happens there.
So it's like renting from the company?
Yeah, you're actually renting from the corporation that you own.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so and it's
but in this case, you don't say they're like renters.
No, you don't call them renters, even though they're technically leasing that space.
Right.
They're actually shareholders, and that's why there's a separate term for shareholders versus condo owners.
I see. So you don't pay property tax?
You don't. So what's interesting is that the entire building has one property tax, and this is where everybody shares together, pays together as co-owners to share that property tax bill.
So that's why don't condos have like less maintenance fees? Do they have more maintenance
Condos
fees?
have, I guess, less maintenance fees, I would say, because
you don't have to pay you have to pay your property tax separately.
Yeah.
And in co-ops, property tax is this huge building, and it's actually included in the maintenance fee that you have to pay for.
Right.
Oh, I kind of get it now.
So, but usually condos are more expensive than co-ops because I don't want to piss off any shareholders, but condos are generally more desirable because you have more control over your space. And because you technically own that space, nobody can come in and kick you out unless, of course, I mean, you've breached your agreement with the condo board and the association, because there's still a condo board, and the building is part of an association of condos, or you fail to pay your property taxes or your mortgage, and the bank comes and takes that. But in a co-op, you have more restrictions than that. You have, you're part of a community of shareholders, so most likely there's going to be more oversight into what you're doing.
More restrictions. More rules.
Right. And to be free from that, you're generally going to have to pay more for a condo.
I see. I get it. So to sum up everything, condo is that real estate that we normally think of, right?
Yes.
You're that is the apartment that you're buying. But a co-op is like cooperation, right?
Yes.
It's a company. You have to stop thinking that it's a property, like separate properties into one, but it's actually just one company.
Right.
Company, and you own shares of that.
Right.
And that's why there are shareholders. And there are more rules in co-ops, and condos, you have a little more right to your space.
Right. Right. You have more right to your space. So, believe it or not, a lot of this will make a significant difference for the part-time super.
I see. So I can kind of assume that how the building is run, like if there is a leak or there's renovations, they operate differently.
Right. Right. Well, yes, absolutely yes. But
Like for example, condo owners, they have less restriction on renovating their space because it is their space, versus co-op shareholders have more restrictions because it's actually not theirs, it's the company's. So you have to get approval from the other shareholders too.
Yeah, I mean, you're on the right track because that definitely should be a something that happens. I would say maybe a better way to look at it would be renting your apartment. Like if you're a shareholder and you want to rent your apartment out, let's say you're moving to a different state and you want to rent your apartment out and you're a shareholder, you're going to have a tougher time doing that than if you were living in a condo.
Mm-hmm.
In a condo, you have, condo, because maybe I should say this. So what did we say about a co-op? What happens in there? Everyone has this piece of paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're co-owners of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like that Ferrari that we talked about. Everyone owns a piece of that Ferrari, but not the actual parts of the car, right? So if all of a sudden another stranger comes in and wants to ride in that car, everyone else is going to be like, whoa, wait a minute. That's like our car, right? So who is this person that's coming in? And is this person, like, does he have the right credentials? Is he a good person? They're going to check all of that stuff. In a condo, you own that space. So generally, you
own your own Ferrari.
You own your own Ferrari. You own your own Ferrari. Whatever you do with it, that's your problem.
I see.
And in the co-op, because let's say you're coming in as a shareholder, like you want to buy a co-op apartment and come in as a shareholder, right? Because now you become a co-owner of that Ferrari, the other owners want to make sure that you're going to be paying your bills for the maintenance of that Ferrari, that you're going to be paying for your registration of that Ferrari, that you're going to be paying for all of the things that go into the upkeep of that Ferrari. Because if they bring in someone to take care of the Ferrari and he's broke or he's a bad person, everyone else is gonna get hurt by that.
I feel like co-op is more like a bus then.
A bus
like
of
you
people?
get a seat.
Yeah, you could say that.
Like there are multiple seats.
Everyone rides in that bus.
Yeah, everyone rides in the bus, and like I want to know who's sitting next to me.
Right.
Whereas condos are just one person car.
Yeah.
Just one person rides in the car.
Right. I mean.
And like if you pay a lot of money, then you get to sit in the cool seat. at the back of the bus.
The cool seats at the back of the bus.
The cool seat.
And then if you don't, you have to sit next to the nerd.
Yeah,
the
next
geek.
to the nerds, or I am the nerd, or next to the driver.
Or next to the driver. Oh God, everyone hated sitting next to the driver.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. So I kind of get it now.
I guess the reason why I pulled up a Ferrari is because it is someone's home, right? And that's valuable to them. You know, when people buy in as shareholders to a co-op, they generally are buying a home. They want to live there. They want to commit themselves there. They want to take care of that. They love that space, their home, and that's why I say Ferrari, because it's kind of like a Ferrari to someone. But a bus is kind of like
no, there are cool buses, like tour buses.
Right, and
don't make fun of buses.
That's true. All I can think of is yellow school buses. But I know what you're saying. I think the concept, is correct. That I would like that concept better.
So from here, then I'm getting still confusion on some of the words. So while I know shareholder only belongs in co-ops, then in condos, do you call the unit owner just the owner?
Yeah, in a condo.
In a condo.
Right.
That's the owner.
I think, yes.
But sometimes don't you call a shareholder an owner as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're practically it's no different. Practically, at the end of the day, they have control over their space. No one else can go in there without their consent, unless it's an emergency or something. They can sell that apartment to another person and probably make a killing off of it if you're living in the city. So at the end of the day, for practical purposes, it seems to be the same thing.
Okay. Then what about residents and tenants and subtenants? Is there anything called sub-resident?
Okay, so subtenants are in a co-op. Remember, you're allowed to stay in there by a lease, right? It's in your apartment. So if you now rent the space that you're leasing to somebody else, that's called a sublease.
Regardless of co-op or condo?
Now, remember, in a co-op, the shareholder has a lease to her space, which technically she doesn't own.
Right.
Or she owns only a part of.
Right.
In a condo, they actually own the deed and the
property.
They own that property,
right?
That apartment. So they are the unit owner, and the person they rent it to is a renter.
And is that the tenant? Renter equals tenant?
Equals tenant, correct.
Okay. Then subtenant is?
Subtenant is the tenant that leases, that rents from a shareholder.
Shareholder, or what about in condos?
No, well, I mean, the only way you could be a subtenant, I think, in function, you could be a subtenant in the condo is when the owner rents to somebody who rents to somebody else.
Right, and in co-ops?
In co-ops, if that owner, that quote-unquote shareholder, rents her apartment to another person, that other person becomes a subtenant.
Okay, so, in condos, there's the owner, unit owner, and if he or she rents it to other person, then that person is a tenant, right?
Right.
But in co-ops, the shareholder is a tenant already.
Yes.
And if the shareholder equals tenant, rents it to someone else, then that person is called subtenant.
A subtenant, yes.
Okay, I see.
Right, so sorry about that. So you actually made it much clearer. So let's figure this out then.
Sorry, one more thing, resident. Then what's a resident in condo and what's a resident in co-op? Does resident mean whoever is living inside that unit? You call whoever it is a resident?
Yeah, I mean, he resides there.
So it's just a very simple term, like a resident who resides there, and it can be tenant, subtenant.
Shareholder.
Well, shareholder equals tenant. Well, in a co-op, and
I just say, I call a resident whoever lives in the building.
whoever lives in the building.
Yeah, rightfully lives in the building.
Okay, regardless of
Building type.
Okay, is it renter or rent?
Right,
okay.
right. Because,
I get it.
yeah,
I get it
basically,
now.
like, let's say if you have a water shutdown, you want to inform all the residents. It doesn't matter if you're a subtenant, tenant, or a shareholder or a unit owner. You want to get that notice out to anyone who's affected by that.
I see.
But if you're asking for money for work that was done inside a shareholder's apartment, that's when it becomes important what that person is.
I get
Whether
it
it's
now.
a subtenant or if someone is asking you inside a co-op to do work, you have to know who's asking you to do that.
Right.
Is it the
right.
subtenant, tenant? Doesn't matter if it's a resident. It just, now it becomes important that you have to know who that person is.
I
Because
see.
then you have to go up that chain of command. You know, if a tenant is asking, if a subtenant, which is a person that's renting the space from the shareholder, comes to you and says, can you do this and this and this in my apartment? The first thing you need to do is who's responsible for that? Is it the shareholder? Is it the building? Is it the subtenant? And once you understand that, and once you answer that question, then you know clearly who's responsible when you're done to pay for that bill. Because
I
if you
see.
just do it, no one's gonna, it's gonna be easy for people to put that responsibility on somebody else.
Yeah, and if I know this, I know who to speak to.
Right.
I get it now. We should make like a little. This is a lot of information. We should make some sort of like PDF.
Or
this.
like a chart or something.
Right? Yeah, like a chart.
Right.
Okay, now I kind of get it. So I have another question though. Airbnb, right?
Right.
When it comes to Airbnb, the person who's renting the place of Airbnb, that person can be a resident too, or tenant.
Well, I kind of want to keep Airbnb out because number one, that's illegal, I think, in New York now.
Is it?
And I think that if you find out as if you're a part-time super in the building, and you see that there's the Airbnb going on, most likely it's in violation of the co-op or condo rules, and it's most likely now a violation of the city's laws.
Oh, I see. I didn't know
So rent. It's Airbnb is different in that we're talking about very short term
that. Yeah.
stay, and
Oh
that
wait, like you lend it to not lend, but you know, your friends, someone's friends inside there, or you know, like. I guess that could be illegal too if Airbnb is illegal.
right.
Doesn't matter if if it's like someone's relative.
Well, that's different. I mean, family members, but once again, co-ops are going to have more restrictions on who you can allow to stay in your space
I see.
versus a condo. And
So if you see an unfamiliar face in the building, I should kind of like be aware.
You should always be aware of who's in your building.
That is so true. Oh
Especially
my
in New York
God, what
City.
am I saying?
Well, you should always know, as a part-time super though, you should always be aware of who's in your building. You're actually, remember, you're one of the most important functions of a part-time super is that you're the eyes and ears of the place. So you're there to make sure that, you know, residents are generally safe by noticing things that are out of place over there. You know, you're there to kind of notice those things that are out of place and letting the building manager or the building know, landlord know about that. So you should always know. But going back to, you know, co-op condos and rental buildings, each of them obviously have a different way that they work. We talked about the different buildings and how it's kind of structured, right?
Right.
And so we know that you know, in rental buildings you have a landlord that makes all the decisions in the building. One person owns all of the apartments.
Yeah.
And
one owner, one corporation. Well, yeah, there's another question then. If it's like a company, like a development company can own a building, right?
Yeah.
Versus co-op. Co-op is also like a company. How do they differentiate then?
Okay. So
It's more advanced question.
it's a more advanced question, yeah, absolutely. But you're really getting into the details here, which is great, because so you're asking me what the difference between a corporation, like let's say a corporation.
Yeah, like a big company
that owns, like I'll say related company that owns a multifamily building, and then you have a corporation,
co-op.
a co-op corporation that owns that, which essentially is the same thing. It owns that entire building.
Right.
The main difference is that in a single landlord building, that landlord has purchased that because that's a business. That building is a business. So it's a for-profit operation. So a development company or another landlord will usually invest in a building and use it to make a profit by buying the building and renting it out and receiving rent money. So profit is always the main point. Is always one of the higher considerations. I wouldn't say main point, but it's a high necessary necessary consideration. You've got to make a profit if you're a landlord. A corporation is a landlord too.
You mean co-op corporation?
I mean a co-op corporation is a landlord too in a way because it owns that building.
Right.
But because of the shares being given out to a whole bunch of shareholders who live in the building, who have a stake in the building, who, these shareholders obviously want to make the building work. So they'll make sure that they'll come together and perform, work to collaborate to make sure that the building is taken care of. It's more about taking care of the home. I mean, the goal of a co-op, then you're kind of saying, what's the goal of a co-op? The goal of a co-op, really what you're asking is, if single landlord buildings, if the goal of single landlord buildings is to make money, make a profit, then what's the goal of a corporation? And I think it's mainly to make sure that it's serving, it's adequately serving as a home community for its shareholders.
Okay, so what I'm thinking is that these development companies, they might have shareholders too, right?
Yes.
But they don't live in there, right? They don't have the tenant company and shareholder tenant relationship.
Yeah.
But in a co-op setting, you have that special relationship of signing the lease from the company, and you have to live there. Well, not all the co-ops, I'm sure there are exceptions, but generally you have to live there, right? The shareholders must live there.
Yeah, there's a requirement that your shareholders live there.
Yeah, and development companies, they're more like investors. Um, those shareholders, they can be living in China or in
Yeah,
Brazil,
anywhere around the world.
yeah, or different states. But co-op, you sign the lease. You have to sign the lease. Shareholder has to sign a lease with the company.
With the corporation as a home, yeah. So
I
there's,
get it. I get it now.
yeah, so a, a co-op corporation is not your traditional landlord, right, in that sense. It's not there for the sole purpose of making a profit. It's there to make sure that it serves as a home for its shareholders.
I see. I see. Well, we can like I heard someone invented co-op. Co-op is something someone actually made, right?
Right, right. It's a financial product, I guess. It's something that was created. I think I'm not. I'm gonna just take a leap at this, but maybe back in the '80s, when I mean, I remember the theory is that because buildings were so dilapidated, buildings were broken down, and rental buildings, the tenants tend to care less about the building, right? And because they don't own it, they don't have any stake. Renters don't have any stake in the building. They don't own anything, so they care less about the building. They can care less about the building. So buildings were becoming worse and worse shape, and then because of the New York City was so, I guess there were problems with the economy that landlords were not able to upkeep their buildings. So there was a really terrible situation where all the buildings were going to look like crap. And what I guess what this allowed building owners to do was to sell the apartments. In this case, make a corporation and sell shares of that corporation to the residents, allow them to buy in so that they can make a profit, and it would also create shareholders who had stake in the welfare, the cosmetic appearance, the condition of the building, that they could take care of it together.
I see. I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
So co-ops were a way for landlords to make a profit, and for renters to become shareholders, and then for them to become stakeholders in the building. And I think that's where maybe we may be impacted by that, is because as supers, when you're working in a rental building, you're not working a lot of times with stakeholders.
With the actual owners of that space, right?
Yeah, you're dealing with renters who have different goals than shareholders. Renters just they're renting a space. They need to play. They
A lot of them like students.
Yeah, a lot of them can be students. I'm trying to separate, renters in buildings, long-term renters, and then I'm talking about the younger renters, like the ones that come here, get a job, fresh out of school, and they're paying. And the purpose of that is to, they're looking for a place to stay, and really this is not, that building is not a place where they're going to call home for a long time. So naturally, they're not going to care for it as much as a shareholder of a building who does care about the things that happen in the building.
Right.
So when you have those two different types of mentalities, those two different goals, you'll work as a super and the building is going to be different,
Yeah, of course.
right?
Yeah, it might be much more work. You know, I think it's just common sense. If it's yours, you care about it.
Yeah.
If it's, if we share it, like, think about it, like bathroom in your home versus public bathroom that everyone uses.
Yes.
I see. Okay. I think some of the things are really clear now. It's still difficult to understand like how the shares work and everything, but at least I know for sure there are shareholders, only co-ops. No.
Well, I think it's not easy, and I think that I'm having a tough time. Even though it's something that I deal with on a daily basis, it is a little difficult for me to explain. But I think the important thing, and the reason why I think you and I are talking about this, is because there could be a lot of confusion when it comes to super's work, because
different people are have different responsibilities.
Yeah, there's different expectations for each building. Renters are paying rent, usually, let's say a high rent, so they want things to be done, right away. They expect it to be included inside their rent, and they may think that, okay, if I tip the super, that should be enough. Whereas a super that's used to living in a condo co-op environment, they're not gonna think that the $2 tip or the $5 tip is enough to do something.
Yeah, like you can't change an air valve for
Right.
$2.
Right. And then also what's different is that in a rental building where the landlord is operating this building as a for-profit enterprise, there is going to be a different way that landlord handles repairs. He's not going to, there may be more of a incentive for him to do a quick repair, like a fast, cheap repair, than to do it correctly.
Right.
Whereas in a co-op, especially if it's inside the apartment, that shareholder is expecting the super to do a great job.
Right.
They don't want shoddy work, especially if it's going to damage not only their apartment, but let's say damages the apartment around them. So the expectations are different in each of these buildings, and the sense of professionalism that they expect. And yeah.
Then as a result, the salary or the pay that you get from those buildings will differ.
Yeah. So ultimately translate to money.
Yeah.
Right? Because landlords are watching their expenses and their bottom line.
Yeah.
They do want to watch their expenses when it comes out to you. So if they can get away with doing work that, is just enough to get by, they'll do that.
Yeah.
And then not have to pay for an outside vendor to come and do it.
Right.
And in the rental building also, the landlord, when they hire somebody, most landlords will want to make sure that the part-time super also includes repair work somewhere in there. And is also expecting that if you do repair work that's paid extra, that it's going to be at a significant discount, right? But if you're working in a co-op environment, there's more of a
quality.
Yeah, the more expectations of quality, and there's more of an expectation that you get paid in addition for doing that special work inside the apartment. So those are some of the differences that that
Could impact.
could
the
impact.
part-time
But
supers.
if yeah, and if you know that as a part-time super and you're trying to get into the industry, or you're in the industry and you're trying to map your way forward and try to figure out how are you going to plan your financial growth in this industry, you really should know
Right.
which building you're going to go into, where you plan to go from there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what your end goal is, um, you know, what what parts of building maintenance you like to do. Like, is it repairs? Is it working with people? Is
Right.
it managing others, running a crew,
Mm-hmm.
like being a leader? Is it, you know, if you know those things, then you can really figure out which building you want to get into, which position, what you're going to learn there, and what opportunity you're gonna jump into next
Mm-hmm.
to further your growth and stuff like that. So if you're already at the top of your game and you're an RM, a resident manager, and you've done, you know, you've done things, you've experienced everything, and you just want to make money, maybe you will, just additional side money, maybe you will go to a brownstone versus another co-op,
Mm-hmm.
because a co-op, you most likely will have to deal with all of this stuff. You know, you're going to have to um, uh, deal with all of this issues that come with a co-op,
Mm-hmm.
versus if it was, you know, if you're going into a rental building, or I'm sorry, if you're going into a brownstone, then you would know, you know, your responsibilities would be limited
Mm-hmm.
to maybe couple simple tasks, and you're
Right.
able to make money from that.
Right.
You know, so um, y- think about these opportunities deeper
Mm-hmm.
than, oh, I just want that building. Oh,
Right.
a building needs a part-time super. Let me just get that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go in there and you do the work, and you may find that you're unhappy, or that things are too hard, or that people expect too much from you, and it becomes difficult. So before before you get into that position, um, if you understand these buildings and how they work, you will. I think you can. This can be a very rewarding path for you,
Yeah.
career-wise.
Right. That was very helpful advice. Now I kind of know the general scope of these buildings.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to review though.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions.
It was a lot of information.
Well, I think that if people have, if anyone has any question, you know, reach out to us, because it's important.
Yeah,
that
and
you
these
know
are the
this.
things that we want to talk about.
Yeah, these are, and when you want to be part of that conversation, when people talk about shareholders and all that stuff,
Yeah.
you should know that should be part of your vocabulary,
Right.
and you should know exactly
Who you're referring
who
to.
you're referring to. If a if a building manager, property manager is interviewing you, and he asks you what you would do in this situation, if you know it, if you know the vocabulary,
Yeah.
and you know, even if you may not know the right answer, but you know who the players are, then it makes you look like, you're so experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So let's learn it.
All right. Thank you for the class.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and asking questions, Jennifer.
My pleasure. Anytime.